welcome to the Mystery Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Morton, and tonight we are talking about paranormal mysteries. So a little woo-woo to go with the murder and mayhem. But before we launch into it, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Shane.
Hi, I am Shane K. Morton, and I write MM romance. Got my start writing drag queen paranormal romance. And I also write dark, romantic, paranormal horror mystery under Sean Asensalt. Yeah, and paranormal mystery is awesome. It's one of my favorite genres. Anyway, go on. Hi.
John?
Hey, my name is John L. French, retired CSI, now mostly writing. My paranormal series is the Bianca Jones series, Here There Be Monsters, Monsters Among Us, and the upcoming The Last Monster, which will basically tells you what happens to that series. I also write about the adventures of Simon Toombs, a character based on Leslie Charteris's The Saint. This is the Saint if he could do magic.
Nice. Irene.
Hi, I'm Irene Preston. I write 2 paranormal romance series, both with Liv Rancourt. One is Vespers, or Hours of the Night, and the other one is Haunts and Hoaxes, which is kind of a spinoff from Hours of the Night. And I probably write a few other things too, but not recently. So let's just go with that.
Mm-hmm. That works. How about you, Amy?
Let's see. I cut my teeth on urban fantasy, and wrote the Little Goddess series, which is I hate this term, but I guess you'd call it a reverse harem now. One girl, many pansexual men. And there has always been a mystery involved. My most recent paranormal series, I just released the 3rd of a 4-book series in the Hedge Witch's Lonely Hearts Club. And that is Pentacles and Pelting Plants. The first one in the series is Shortbread and Shadows. That's the 3rd. And the 4th one is going to be out in January. So that's exciting. And that's Heartbeats in a Haunted House. And I have done pretty much everything in between. I've done angels and demons. I've done werewolves in the Little Goddess world. I have done, let's see, All the Rules of Heaven, which is ghosts. To me, it's just once you establish that these are the rules of the world, I can work with that.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I kind of view all books as having a mystery to them, because if the reader knew what was going to happen on page 1, why would they read the rest? But in terms of really having a crime to solve or a murder to solve or a criminal to catch, all of the urban fantasy does that, in addition to lots of paranormal, ghosts, magic, all the creatures, and in the Morgan Bryce stuff, a lot of romance and sexy times. So,
as there should be.
Paranormal romance. For a while, that was an oxymoron. You know, it was don't get your paranormal stuff in my mystery. We just want to have cops and investigators and keep it totally human. Why do you think paranormal mystery caught on? John? Because you're really coming from the trenches.
Okay, I think paranormal mysteries caught on because for 100 years now, or however long it's been since Sherlock Holmes declared no ghosts need apply. You know, we've had the intellectual detective, Sherlock Holmes. We've had the amateur detective, you know, Jessica Fletcher, Miss Marple. We've had the hard-boiled detective, Harold John Daly's Race Williams, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe, Dashiell Hammett's The Continental Op, and Sam Spade. And I think, you know, and there's variations. You know, people have run through all the variations. There is the blind detective. There is the disabled detective. Ironside was not the first. That was an Inspector Alhoff. There was one who, there's actually two anthologies by a small college press, and forgive me for, you know, putting it this way, but that's what these were, these are what they were called, The Adventures of the Defective Detectives, in which each of the detectives had some kind of disability, be they little people, be they blind, be they deaf, be them who act. There was actually one who had the hysterical paralysis whenever he got afraid, which is not a good, I mean, hysterical blindness whenever he got afraid, which is not a good thing when you're getting shot at. So eventually, I think eventually all the variations were used up and people were looking for something new. And then along comes C.J. Henderson with his Teddy London series, and Harry Dresden. And forgive me, I don't remember.
Jim Butcher.
And Jim Butcher with Harry Dresden. And there were a number of other people who decided, well, you know, a lot of horror stories involve dead bodies. So let's mix the two together. I think that's the same reason we had all those historical mysteries coming out. It was something new, and I think it's this something new. And each author brings in their own take on it. C.J. Henderson was a hard-boiled detective writer, so Teddy London was hard-boiled. When I created Bianca Jones, she was a member of the Baltimore City Police Department and wound up teamed with a criminalist. So each author brings in what they know to the paranormal.
Okay, great start for this. Irene, what do you think?
That was a very clever answer. Mine's not going to be as clever. I think it's just a natural intersection of the normal mystery where you have these these clues to follow and everything, and then I think there's always the sense that if the crime is really hard to solve, there's a frustration of how do you solve it. And even in real life, and the same in real life, we've talked before, I think on different panels about why do people believe or want to believe in ghosts or the paranormal. And so I think it's and just to borrow kind of a catchphrase, they want to believe. And so I think it's a natural intersection when you have these crimes or murders or whatever, a lot of times that you want to be solved, or some other problem. If it's not a mystery, if it's just a paranormal, then it's natural to want.
Oh, did you freeze, Irene? I think we lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just tell us what we missed. You said it was natural to want something.
She's still frozen.
Oh, she's still frozen. Well, she's working on coming back to us. See, this is the ghost piece with Zoom panels. Come to us, strengthen the signal.
Back, Irene, come back.
Come back.
We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Pick your heels and say, there's no place like Zoom. There's no place like Zoom.
Well, while we're trying to recover Irene, Amy, what are your thoughts?
Many and varied. First of all, I do agree with what Irene was saying before she blacked out, which is that it is kind of a natural extension, that asking questions and getting answers you don't expect, that leads us directly to the paranormal. I do think that the explosion in paranormal mystery and urban fantasy mystery really came into being, though, with kind of an interesting cultural phenomenon. And sorry guys, it's almost exclusively female related. Laurel K. Hamilton, Charlene Harris, the original urban fantasy writers used the paranormal world, and J.D. Robb did this to some extent, except using the future instead of paranormal. The paranormal world was used as a leveler, as a social leveler, that women, gay men, people in the world did not have the social heft they needed to be presented as heroes in contemporary fiction. They were not getting their due. They were not being listened to. The idea of a woman walking, and we see it all the time now on TV. A woman, anybody, people, at least our media has learned that we want everyone to have respect, but to have somebody walk into a room, a woman walk into a room, command the attention and the respect of all the guys in there and say, okay, we're moving on this off now. In 1995, nobody would go to that movie. Nobody would go to that movie. And the paranormal world was a way to get all the people who loved the mystery, wanted to be involved in the mystery, wanted to solve the mystery. It was a way to level them up into it gave them the social heft, which is an archetypal term of what we need a hero to have, that ability for people to just stop and listen. And fiction wise, I think the paranormal worlds, the urban fantasy worlds gave people who did not normally have that social heft, it gave them that voice to be heard and to be able to lead and to be considered the leader of the monsters. Could be a 5'2" woman charging into the fray because she had, sexually powered nuclear fusion blasting out her ass, and she could take out the bad guys just as equally as anybody else in the picture.
Okay. Irene, we lost you there for a minute. Anything you wanted to add to your comment there?
What, me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Hi, and welcome.
Welcome back.
Okay, so I'm always trying to outsmart my internet. So far, I haven't succeeded.
Okay. Shane, how about you? What do you think?
Genre lines always tend to blur. Is there a genre that really hasn't blurred at this point in time together in some way or some form? And for me, paranormal is a mystery. For me, it's just because it's something you don't know normally in life. So blending paranormal and mystery together seems like a very easy fit, honestly. And we see it, the late 90s on TV kind of really was a heyday for it. And more books followed very quickly after that, I think. So
yeah, I think kind of going back to something that John said, where we had gone through so many different angles on non-paranormal crime fighters. And I think some of those really pushed the believability of them not having supernatural talents. Sherlock was smart, but he was so smart that you started wondering if he, might have a little bit of clairvoyance going for him. Same thing with House, same thing with Poirot. And they could say, well, he's got Asperger's, so he's got amazing focus, or he's somewhere on the spectrum. So he's got this incredible attention to detail and eidetic memory. But it was to the point where that became a superpower that really kind of pushed the believability for people who didn't have some sort of ESP. And at the same time, I think we also started to see real life cases where the police had hit a wall on a serial killer, and they actually did take advice from a psychic. And I think that entered the public thought to say, well, why not? And John, don't my bubble and say they never did that. Please just leave me my.
No, what I wanted to say was that, remember, well, some of you might remember the serial killer responsible for the Atlanta child murders.
Yes.
Well, back when I was working in the crime lab, they had this thing called the identikit, where it was essentially a bunch of clear squares, each with a particular body part on it. Like there might be one series of squares with different kinds of noses and another series of squares with different kinds of eyes. And the idea was that the witness would give you a description of the perpetrator, and you would switch these around until you got a clear picture of what the person looked like. One day I get called up to the homicide office. They told me to bring the identikit, and I was introduced to a psychic who had called the police. The police had used this psychic before, and he had called the police saying he had a vision of the Atlanta child murderer. And they asked me to put the identikit together based on this guy's psychic description. So yes, the police do that. Oh, by the way, the guy, the description he gave me looked nothing like the guy who was eventually convicted, which if we were writing a mystery about this, that would mean the wrong person was convicted for whatever, but I have.
Well,
Or maybe
I do
he
think
just
that-
never caught that guy.
Maybe there were two of them,
Yeah. Well,
By the way, to the defense attorneys out there, this is not an endorsement to revisit the trial and try to get it overturned. And I'm talking to you, Michael Ventrella.
Well, I do think yes, that these fictional detectives did push the boundaries of believability. I also believe, and I believe that intuition, which very, very often is that kind of blending of telling a story at the same time you're seeing all the details that build up to the story. I think intuition is really, really, really hard to explain to people who deal in hard, cold facts. And that blending intuition and mystery storytelling really does lend itself to paranormal circumstances. To some people, what is it? If a writer, we're all writers, we see 3 or 4 details. Okay, we see a homeless man in the park. We see the pictures in his wallet. We see the way he talks to a woman's dogs as she passes, and we write a story from those 3 details, right? And if that story turns out to be true, that's intuition. That's us using our narrative processes. To some people, that's magic.
Mm-hmm.
That's reading a set of tarot cards and coming up with somebody else's life. That's making, and I think it's just only a little bit of a leap from what looks like magic to, the hard-boiled detective to what, to paranormal, to what if there's real magic,
Mm-hmm. Irene, what kinds of magic or paranormal elements captivate you when you're reading a paranormal mystery?
All of them. Oh gosh, why do you? It's always which, all of them. So I don't know. I mean, what I'm fascinated with, one of the things that I've been fascinated with, I guess, in my own writing is how, because these days, I mean, mostly what we do is more based toward urban fantasy rather than, something that's completely outside of our own world. so a lot of what fascinates me is how paranormal beings or humans with paranormal abilities fit into what is a seemingly everyday world. So I devote a weird amount of time to thinking about that when I'm writing, or procrastinating, as Liv like but just trying to figure out, like, I mean, because to me, if I suddenly spouted, second sight or whatever, I mean, I wouldn't tell anybody. Everybody thinks I'm crazy already. They would lock me up. So how do you kind of cope with that in the everyday world? And even more so if you happen to be some type of paranormal creature with your own, potential, community and history of your community. So, so those things, and then the sort of meshing it together with some kind of pseudoscience, I guess. Like, how do we explain the paranormal ability? I guess I'm a skeptic because I always want to have some methodology of how it works, and so those are things that really captivate me in other writing too. I mean, when I pick up things, I'm really interested when there's like a really rich world, a really, really good world building and kind of a backstory as to how this happened, or when the character struggles with how and why it's happening, because I would identify with that.
Okay. How about you, Shane?
Well, it depends on what it is I'm wanting to read or write at the time. If it's kind of more of a paranormal ghost possession, that kind of bent to it, I actually like one that kind of blends a little bit of science-based into it, so that it actually has some kind of real world touch point that you can kind of base it off of. But I love my werewolves and my vampires and my witches and my magic users and my unicorns and my fairies, and like, bring them all to me. I think my favorite to read is definitely witchcraft. I want it to be real so bad, and so I really find the losing myself in one of those books incredibly easy to do. But I kind of like it when it's all thrown together with like Greek gods or Roman gods, and it's all of the worlds kind of clashing into one. I think that Valleywood is a series that, or Vel Valley is a series that's out, and I really love the way that it's just kind of all of it combined into one giant never-ending story, with all multi-authors and that kind of thing. But I like it when those worlds collide for me.
Okay.
Writing it, not so much when it comes to the worlds colliding. I like to focus, but still,
Amy, how about you?
What was the question again? I got so immersed in everybody's answers.
Which paranormal elements are your favorites to use in a paranormal mystery?
Oddly enough, the weird blending of real world and paranormal elements. When my hedge witches, again, I just had one release, and one of the things that happens immediately after their spell goes wrong is squirrels start marching in a little infinity symbol across the 3 lawns of the coven, right?
You don't see that every.
Right? And I see squirrels every freaking day, and those little assholes are trying to wreck my car, man, because they're attempting to commit suicide, and I will not let them commit suicide by minivan, and it's become an all-out war. Okay, to have the little doing an infinity sign across 3 lawns, right, in line, like the 7 dwarves and a big old never-ending squirrel thing, would freak me the hell out. So taking that real world, or any real world detail, and just twisting it. The second book, Portals and Puppy Dogs, guy's walking his friend's dogs. His friends have been sucked into a vortex. All he can do is take care of their dogs to make sure that, to help. That taking care of the damn dog is his one thing. The dog gets teleported through a hole in the space-time continuum to his boss's house. And all he can do for hours is freak out about where the hell did the dog go. Okay. Our actual lives are consumed by little tiny details that we absolutely rely on for us to feel grounded in reality. Everything from walking our dogs to what we have for lunch. As soon as paranormal world building starts sticking with that, we as a whole would be thrown into chaos. We as actual people, if suddenly we saw birds flying upside down in the sky, that would be it. We'd be off our rocker for the rest of the day till we figured out what was wrong. I have turkeys walking in my neighborhood. When they decide to land on the top of my house, because they pick one house a day, and like every 2 months or so, your house gets turkey bombed. It's just kind of a fact of life. If suddenly they're all turkey bombing the same house for day after day after day on end, okay, the person living in that house, I mean, dude, you would just move, okay? Middle of the night, you would move and let the turkeys have it, because that would freak us out. So that is one of my favorite elements, is taking the everyday, turning it on its ear, and letting the people in the paranormal world the people who think that they're in regular Earth, or even if they don't, even if they know there's magic, even if they're a magical entity, to suddenly have to deal with the rules of the paranormal when it's not expected. They expected a regular suicidal squirrel. They didn't expect a little army of them. That to me would be the thing that would freak me out as a person the most. So it freaks my characters out the most, even if they're dealing with large, huge forces, even if they suddenly become a werewolf. When they shift back, not having enclosed is a problem.
This is true.
Having to eat 3 times their body weight, that's a problem. If you're a sorceress and you have a sexually fueled nuclear fusion ray, and I swear to God, I wrote this, what happens when she's having a difficult pregnancy and she's not getting any? Where does her power come from? How do you sex her up or emotion her up in order that she does not wither and die while she's trying to, deal, because pregnancy was hard enough. I mean, I did it 4 times. It does not get easier.
Well, hold that thought and let's ask John.
Okay.
What's your take on this?
Okay, as far as the kind of paranormal mysteries I like to write, granted, Simon Toombs is a very dangerous magic user, who's well aware that all magic has its price, and his intention is to make sure other people pay that price. But I prefer writing stories about ordinary people who are, who are faced with dealing with the supernatural with only their smarts and their, and their human abilities. That's Bianca Jones. She's a Baltimore City police detective who basically sees vampires and werewolves and everything as perks to be arrested, and there are crimes to be solved. A book I have coming out in 2022 deals with, it's set in Pat Thomas's Agents of the Abyss universe. And he told me he wanted a mystery story set in Dracula's castle. And to do this, up comes Jane Watson, who is John Watson's daughter and Sherlock Holmes's goddaughter. So she has an advantage. She was trained by 2 of the best. And after solving the mystery of a haunted house, she winds up heading for Transylvania to Dracula's castle to solve an honest-to-God mystery. And along the way, she encounters invisible men, werewolves, a mystery that was actually taken from a real-life occurrence. But I keep it founded in the mystery genre. Yes, there are vampires running around. Yes, they want to kill her. But there are still murders to be solved, and she basically applies her science background, her medical background, and the training she was given by Holmes. So she's a very talented woman, but she's also a very human woman dealing with very inhuman things.
Cool. So in your stories, is the paranormal hidden, or is it out in the open? I've read a mix of those. You know, in my Badlands series, my psychic is working as a police consultant, and everybody doesn't necessarily buy into it, but they can't complain about the results because they do catch the perps. In the Treasure Trail series, the poor beleaguered Cape May sheriff knows that they keep having these problems with the warring mafia factions, and they haven't even told him about the witches and the ghosts and the paranormal creatures because he's already stressed enough. So it's kind of fun sometimes to have stuff going on under the radar of the cops, and sometimes it's fun to have them in on the problem. Shane, how do you do it?
Most of the time, my paranormal's hidden, or it's just not something that the characters knew about. When I first, my first book, The Trouble with Off-Campus Housing, was about a drag queen that burned down his dorm accidentally, got thrown off campus and had to move into another place, moved into a haunted house where he discovered he was the chosen one to break the curse and to save the family. But all he really wanted to do was to get back into the dorm, you know? So the story is all about him really just trying to get back to where he feels like his home. And the curse and the haunted house and everything happening around him is just stuff that he can't explain, but he knows he has to deal with because it's the only place he has to live. And then my Cowboy Witches book, I mean, magic is just a part of that world. You know, he's a marshal, an empath that goes around and catches murderers and solves crimes. But everyone is dealing with magic. There's magic schools and, you know, all that kind of stuff. In my Sean Asensalt books, I mean, the paranormal is usually dark and in terms of like possession or Frankenstein type of things that happen to my characters, that is all kind of scientific based, but it's not really a part of the world. It's just something that is happening, and whether, you know, that they didn't understand or know about it before it happens. I think I prefer to write characters typically that are experiencing it for the first time, so they have to come to some kind of grasp as to what's actually happening to them, not just personally but in the world around them also. So their view has to completely shift and change to be able to rationalize those events that's happening to them.
Okay,
That
Irene?
was a long answer.
No, that made a lot of sense. Irene?
Before I get to that, I just wanted to say I was listening to everybody's answers to the last question, and I was really intrigued by sort of how a lot of the answers revolved around kind of touchstones in the real world. And maybe that some of it, I do see that there's a huge, there's two kind of things that go on. I like both of them, but there's like the worlds where it's anything goes, all of the mythology kind of collides, and then there's worlds where it seems to zero in on just kind of one talent or whatever. And I'm wondering if that's kind of catering to two different kind of levels of willingness to suspend disbelief, because, you know, on the one hand, you've got these worlds where it's pure fantasy, anything goes, you know, anything could happen. And then but then you have, like, you know, with Shane's, I want witchcraft to be real, like witches or psychic detectives or anything. You want so bad to believe, like, because people say they can do it. You want that to be true. You're like, witchcraft, okay, that, you know, it's like a recipe. You know, I can cook, so if I put the right herbs together, you know, I could turn someone into a frog. So, you know, it can happen. Anyway, so we do in our world, the one we're writing right now, Liv's got some differences, but the ones we write together, the paranormal is mostly hidden. The book that started it all, Vespers and Hours of the Night, It's hidden from everyday people, but the characters are not kind of alone in their inhumanness. So our main character, Thaddeus, is a vampire who was, before he was turned, he had wanted to be a monk. And so he actually works for the church, for a secret order of the church that's tasked with demon hunting. And then we kind of branch off from there. But in a fun way, also, and then, so that goes on, and then, you know, so most people in that world don't know that the paranormal exists, but you have this whole group of people within their sphere that do know. So, so you've got, you know, the monks and, you know, the various, you know, people that they come into contact with. But then it's really weird because Haunts and Hoaxes is technically within that same universe, except for Adam and Noel are firmly in the camp of people within that universe who did not know the paranormal existed until it kind of blindsided Noel, and he discovered that he was either crazy or had psychic abilities. So that's the way we handle that.
Okay. Amy, how about you? Secret, out in the open, or a little both?
Well, okay, first of all, my own point of view, I am a little flaky and a little people blind and a little bit, nearsighted. Okay, so very, very often when I'm walking my usual paths in my day, something completely unexpected will happen, like, oh, hey, there's a house there, or I didn't realize that tree had come down, or holy God, where did that German Shepherd come from? He's aiming right for my little tiny dog. That these things sneak up on me in a very surprising way, like magic. And so the kind of thing that drives most of my paranormal is, yes, it's hidden, but it's hidden in the way that that not every person can see every world in the regular world we're in. Yes, let me see, I'm trying to think. Those people who put germ stuff on every surface and, you know, could polish their grocery bags at the beginning of the pandemic and could vacuum, you know, knew where, oh my goodness, there's a little clump of cat hair in the south wing of the, you know, the west side of the mansion. Those people actually exist, but to me, they might as well be witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and vampires, because I don't know any of them personally. And if I stumble across them, they are magical to me. And so for my characters, they are walking along in the regular real world. And I'm thinking of one in particular in All the Rules of Heaven. Tucker is an empath, and he has been told by the forces that be very early on, and it's mostly by trial and error, that he gets a call, he goes to meet a person, he meets the person, male, female, they usually have an encounter, mostly sexual. And in the course of that encounter, of him just being a good listener and a really great lover, the person will go, wow, I've just realized that I have to do something in my life to fix it. And he's like, that's fantastic. Have a good life. It was lovely to meet you. And then he goes back to his apartment where he has no lasting human relationships, because if this were really to happen to somebody and they had to face the call and it was absolutely imperative because bad things happened if they didn't, they couldn't hold down a job. They couldn't hold friendships. You can't make plans if when you think you're going to go meet your friends for a movie, you have to go and have a one-nighter, or, you know, he couldn't graduate from college. He had to do that online. That all of these human things that are other people take for granted, he couldn't do. Now, none of his friends knew this. Okay, the one friend he had died, and died because of it. So he seems like a flake living off of his inheritance. We've all known some guy like that, right? Someone who couch surfed his way through life until he found a way to make money and just hung out. We would not ever accuse them of being an empath or a victim of the magical fates or having a superpower. They would just be a flake. So for me, the magic is, it's very possible.
Yeah, so
It is
you're really
very
talking
possible.
hidden in plain sight, which I totally
Yeah.
get. 'Cause I'll say,
Yeah.
when did they build that? And my husband will go, a month ago. Oh, you know, I wasn't
But
looking
as
at
far
it.
as I'm concerned, it just sprouted up like a mushroom.
That's
And
right.
so that's exactly, and
I-
that's the way magic is to my characters, that it seems very, very natural to them. And yet to someone else, they'd be like, oh, wow, you can do that. Well, yeah, but it was an accident. Yeah, but you did that.
Well, John, what do you think? Hidden or in plain sight?
Well, in my stories, excuse me, magic tends to be hidden from the average person. I used to read a lot of Charles DeLint, wonderful books. And in his world, people didn't see magic. The people who did not believe in magic couldn't see it. Their minds would interpret magical events in a mundane way. For the Simon Tombs stories, you know, if basically Simon doesn't try to hide it, he doesn't really care if people realize, you know, he's a magician, because half the time they're not going to believe it anyway. With Bianca Jones, in the first book, she's sort of the unofficial monster hunter. She knows what's going on. There's one or two people who knows what's going on. The command structure of the BPD knows it, and everybody covers it up because they don't want the average person to freak out. By the end of that book, and in the second collection, Monsters Among Us, it's pretty much known throughout the department. And if something weird or strange or just bat crap crazy shows up, you call Bianca Jones and her freak show, which is what her team of specialists is now called. You know, so it's, again, the general public doesn't know, but it's beginning to filter through the police department, because there are some things you just can't keep.
Okay. Well, folks, we have blown through our time. It's been fantastic. And I know we could talk for the rest of the evening, but before we wrap things up, let's go around and have everybody say where people can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, be sure you tell us about it. Shane?
You can find me at shanekmorton.com. On Facebook in my readers group, the Shane's Sweet and Salty Readers. We have a lot of fun in there. And then on Twitter, Instagram, God help me, TikTok, Shane K. Morton author, I believe, was on all of those. I have a new drag queen cozy mystery coming out in November. And my last book came out last month, and it was oh my God, really, Shane? Remember the name of your book. That's really helpful. It was called Red Carpet Disaster. It was a part of Valleywood. It is impreg with bird shifters and Greek gods, and falls in that world.
Awesome. John?
Okay. You can find me, my Amazon authors page is under the name John L. French. You can find me on Facebook. At conventions, you can find me in the first Saturday in November up in New Jersey at the Pulp Adventure Con, and the second Saturday of December at the Ocean City Comic Con. My newest books are Mortal Sins, which are stories about a forensic investigator who worked for the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. There is, that's due in December, also doing this throughout in December, is Frankenstein, Monsters of the Abyss, which Pat Thomas and I retell the story of Frankenstein, putting in all the good bits that Mary Shelley left out. I edited an anthology with Danielle Ackley McPhail called Devilish and Divine, which each story has either an angel, a demon, or possibly both involved, and some of them are mysteries. So, if you can wait until April, there is Chessie at Bay, the Systema Paradoxa, a novella about the origins of how a sea creature winds up in the Chesapeake Bay.
Very nice. Irene?
I'm at irenepreston.com and at Irene Preston most places. You can also join my Facebook group, After Hours with Liv and Irene, linked from my irenepreston.com. Liv and I together are at presscourtbooks.com if you want one-stop shopping. And what have I got coming out? Okay, I'm super superstitious about even mentioning it, but I think that the third Fall Hours of the Night book might be out next year. Things happened. I stopped writing for a while, but I am writing again now, and I am actually writing the book with Liv. So, but I didn't say anything because I don't want to jinx it. So look forward to that.
Awesome. Amy?
Let's see. You can find me on Facebook on Amy Lane Anonymous. I pretty much mostly haunt that. You can find me at Twitter at Amy McLean, but I don't do much on Twitter. You can find my website at amylaneromance.com. And you can also find my Patreon link on my website. I do Patreon. I post about 3 or 4 times a month. So my Patreon's worth it. And there's a lot of unlocked stories there too.
Great. Well, I'm pretty easy to find online at gailzmartin.com and morganbryce.com. All of the social media is some variation of one of those names. Put them in, spell them right, you'll find me. The latest Gail book is Legacy, which is the 5th book in the Deadly Curiosities series. And the newest Morgan Bryce book is Trash and Treasure, which is a wonderful love story between a raccoon shifter and a possum shifter. You need this in your life.
Delightful.
And there are donuts, seductive donuts. It's important. But mostly you can find me here on ConTinual. So thank you to our wonderful, wonderful panelists for another great conversation. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more mystery coming up on ConTinual, so we'll see you online.